Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. How are you? Glad you're here. So some things have happened since last we talked. We have penny a barrel oil. So oil is usually like $50 a barrel, maybe it gets to $100 a barrel and people freak out. Yesterday it was a penny. So for $100, you could buy 10,000 barrels of oil. Like, what in the world? For a while, actually, oil was negative. Like, no way has it ever happened before, right? Like, I can't. Negative oil? Oil was more of a liability than an asset? What the heck does that even mean for everything? Like, the only time I can imagine when oil was a liability more than an asset was back before we knew what to do with oil, and a farmer would strike oil, and it would just be a nuisance. So maybe he would like pay someone to come and clean up the oil off of his farmland because then we didn't know what oil was. That's the last time that oil's been a liability. So what is that? What is the negative oil? What are the ramifications of that? There's no economic model for negative oil or penny a barrel oil. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then on top of all that, as if this wasn't enough, we got reports last night that Kim Jong-un is maybe brain dead, maybe on his deathbed. No one knows, which is why we're not going to spend a lot of time on it now because who knows. But that's just what we need right now. We need a superpower confrontation over a failed nuclear state that happens to be right next to China. Seth Mandel, he said the writers of this TV show that we're living in called America 2020, they are doing an unthinkable amount of cocaine right now. They're just completely off the rails. Last season wasn't very good. They thought last season would be good with the impeachment, and it was just a big tank. So this year they had to come back, and they came back way too strong. Pandemic, nuclear confrontation. Maybe we'll throw in a open Supreme Court seat in the next few days too. Good night. So we'll see what happens if these reports about Kim Jong-un are true. And then what happens after that? Are you willing to go to war with China over the future of the Korean Peninsula? I'm not even ready to have that conversation right now. But keep this in mind. This was a real CNN tweet that's still up. This is from 2018. This is during the Olympics here. Do we have it? Let's see, I got it right here. Kim Jong-un's sisters stealing the show at the Winter Olympics. So get ready. She may be taking over, maybe. I mean, who knows, right? But she may take over. So get ready for more fawning praise from our media over maybe the new leader from North Korea. And I don't know anything about her. She may be like super pro-Western, or she may be like in Ozark and House of Cards, where the woman is way more evil than the man either. I have no idea. Excited coming up. We got Stephen Mosher is going to be here. He called incredibly early the fact that this virus might have come from a lab in Wuhan. Wrote an article in the New York Post, and Twitter and Facebook banned people from sharing this article in the Post. And it turned out to be, well, I don't want to say true because we don't know where it came from, but very, very possible, as opposed to something, oh, absolutely lie. You can't even spread it. You can't even share it on Facebook and Twitter. Give me a break. So he wrote a book a couple years back called Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to World Order. So we're going to talk to him coming up in just a few minutes. First, let's kind of get caught up with some big picture points on the virus here. Timeline. I don't know why I'm obsessed with timeline. I just like to be able to wrap my head around what's coming, right, and what to prepare for. So you've seen headlines that some states are relaxing some things, right, opening up beaches, a couple stores with protective measures, all that stuff. Now, first, you got to watch out for headlines, right, because you're going to see headlines that states are reopening again, but it's not. It's still very restrictive. And it all still really depends on what people are willing to do, right, and where they're willing to go. But just a little perspective, because I think that gets people excited. Like, oh, Tennessee and Georgia are opening up. That means we're next. The CEO of Wynn Casinos. So Wynn Casinos, they have 2 in Vegas. They have 1 in Massachusetts, in Boston of all places. And they have 3 in China, in Macau. Is there anyone, any CEO, who has more of an incentive to open up more than the CEO of a casino? Listen, everyone can make their argument that like we all want to open up, right? But like a casino owner you think would be the guy who's like we got to open up right now, right? They're losing massive amounts of money every single second. So you'd think this guy would be like, hey, we got to open up tomorrow. And the CEO of Wynn Casino is saying, maybe Memorial Day, which is 5 weeks away. Of all people, you think he'd be like, we got to open up right now. And even he's like, man, I don't know, maybe May 25th, probably June, if we do things right here. He released a 23-page memo on how Vegas is going to socially distance and all this stuff. Let me read this quote. Guests will be advised to practice physical distancing by standing at least 6 feet away from other people while standing in lines, using elevators, or moving around the property. Restaurant tables, slot machines, and other physical layouts will be arranged to ensure appropriate distancing. CEO of Wynn Casinos, if I may. Have you ever been to Vegas? You want everyone to stand 6 feet apart. I told the guys in New York to grab any footage or any picture of Vegas. I have no idea what they're going to show here. There you go. Okay, let's go. There's your, I think I was at that party, actually. That looks familiar. I was indeed there. That's my favorite DJ. Kamikaze, I think that said, sold a lot of access somehow. So there you go. Let's have that. Like, that's the Vegas business model, right? Fit as many people as physically possible. It's like squeeze the slot machine and the theaters and everything, the tables, the poker table, put everything as close as possible, fit as many people as possible in as small of a space as possible. And everything is priced out based off of that. How are you possibly going to cut that down to a sixth of what Vegas has always been and remain functioning? Like that pool, what are you gonna have that pool party? You're gonna have people like hall monitors walking around, like, well, keep your distance, 6 feet, 6 feet. It's an impossibility. I don't know what that could possibly look like. Now, it's not just casinos. Last week, there was a conference call between Trump and some of the top Wall Street guys. And again, I would have thought that the Wall Street guys would have been saying, we got to open up as soon as possible. But apparently, some of them were criticizing Trump for wanting to open up too fast. And they're saying he doesn't have enough of a plan to open up. He said we're pushing it too fast. Here, let me read the quote. Do I have the quote? No, I don't have the quote. I'll paraphrase. One of the CEOs, one of the Wall Street guys, said that they were worried that Trump would succumb to pressure tactics. That was the word. Pressure tactics to reopen the economy too quickly before the virus is under control. So it's interesting that the bankers, the Wall Street guys, aren't the ones saying reopen now. They're saying we need to be more cautious too. Wild. And then I'll throw on top here Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark Zuckerberg said that they're canceling all Facebook events over 50 people until June 2021. And I think that's important because these tech guys in Silicon Valley were the first people to see this virus coming from China. They really were. They were the first ones to see it from a distance and the first ones waving the flag saying this is going to be a problem. And now you have Zuckerberg and others at Silicon Valley saying, we have a ways to go on this. Well, 15 months, according to Zuckerberg there. So I don't know what you want to do with that. We have competing ideas. Some states opening up now, some people saying months, and even into 2021. So I have no idea, but I would just temper all expectations. That's always a good reminder. All right, coming up next, looking forward to talk to our guest about China and how they're the worst. I want to come back and break down what I think is I'm so sick of this question to President Trump. Why didn't you act sooner? I'm so sick of this question. So I'm going to do some Zen breathing and yoga poses and calm down and come back and we'll outline all that coming up next. True story, Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, nothing makes me more frustrated in this time, truly, than this question that some hack reporter asks every single day, multiple times a day, to President Trump. It is it's like I have to take deep breaths. It's so infuriating. And so Drudge linked to this, actually. I don't know what's been going on with Drudge lately. Well, it's been like this for a while, but CBS, headline, pressed by CBS correspondent on lack of warning. Like, why would someone even ask this question? Why would Drudge even link to this question? But check out Trump's body language to this question.
People knew it was happening, and people did not want to talk about it. Many Americans are saying the exact same thing about you, that you should have warned them the virus was spreading like wildfire through the month of February instead of holding rallies with thousands of people. Why did you wait so long to warn them?
Who you with?
And why did you not have social distancing until March 16th?
Who you with?
I'm Weijia Jiang with CBS News.
So, if you look at what I did in terms of cutting off or banning China from coming in.
Chinese nationals. But by the way, not Americans who are also
Nice and
coming
easy,
from China.
nice and easy, just relax. We cut it off. People were amazed. These gentlemen, everybody was amazed that I did it. We had 21 people in a room. Everybody was against it but me. Dr. Fauci said, had I not done that, perhaps tens of thousands, and maybe much more than that, people would have died. I was very early, very, very early.
Goes on for 3 minutes of that. If you want more information on this, look at Dan Crenshaw tweeted out his appearance on Bill Maher the other day and just debunks every single aspect of this. It's brilliant. But these reporters, ridiculous. Trump was so far ahead of this virus if you take into account all the competing factors that he had to factor in. We're not going to do it again, but we've played the clips. You've seen them all of Bill de Blasio and Nancy Pelosi and New York City council members, just Democrat after Democrat, saying not only, hey, everybody, come on out and go to the store and go to the mall, whatever, but saying, come on down to Chinatown. Right? Like, what are you talking? God, that lady was like, oh, yeah, you banned Chinese people, but not Americans who were in China. Why didn't you ban everyone from China? And at the same time, when he did that, Democrats were saying, hey, everyone, come on out and celebrate the Lunar New Year parade. Everything's amazing. Don't let Trump racist China ban prevent you from celebrating in Chinatown. And now they're doing this all, oh, why didn't you act soon enough, Mr. President? Give me a break. Trump was way further ahead than what you would expect him to be, right? He's supposed to be the business president, and he shut down the economy. He made a very difficult call way before most people were thinking about this. But the media and so many people are so not honest about this. This is it's actually a very progressive thing, right? So progressives expect, they're like the modern day, like moral fundamentalists, right? So they expect perfect judgment and judge everyone in retrospect. Remember, we've been saying this a lot lately that everyone, the media, reporters, every politician, everybody comes to this pandemic with the tools that were in their toolbox. No one had any time to go grab some other tools before the pandemic hit. You have what you got. And the left's toolbox, it's Trump bad, everything's racist, oppressed versus oppressors versus oppressed, right? And one of them is the left needs to judge people in the past based off of today's standards. So we judge the founding fathers and their views on slavery based off of today's moral standards. We judge Christopher Columbus based off of today's standards. And they're doing it with Trump here too. Here's the media, they're judging February Trump based off of what we know today. And that's obviously very unfair. It's a hack move. Now it gets even worse. I'll give you the best example of all. This is Genia Bellafanta, I guess is her name. She's a New York Times reporter. Ran a story, just the other day in the New York Times, ran a story about a couple who went on a cruise, I think, to Spain. And they were like in their 70s. I think the guy was 74. And their kids said, hey, maybe you guys shouldn't go. There's this virus thing going around. Probably not a good idea. But they went anyway. Joe, a non-smoker, healthy, he didn't see the problem about going on the cruise. He watched Fox and believed it was under control, his daughter told me. Early in March, Sean Hannity went on the air proclaiming that he didn't like the way that Americans were being scared unnecessarily. He said, quote, "It's like, let's bludgeon Trump with this new hoax," quoting Hannity right there. Okay, so therefore, so Hannity said it's a hoax. This couple saw that because they watch Fox News like a bunch of idiots, and they went on a cruise and died. Blood on Sean Hannity's hands, okay? Just want to get the timeline right here. They went on the cruise March 1st. Hannity's quote that she used there in the article was from March 8th. And the author of the story herself, we have her tweet right here. This is February 27th. She said, "I fundamentally don't understand the panic. Evidence of the disease is declining in China. Virus is not deadly in vast majority of cases." She sent that February 27th, which means if her parents were deciding whether or not to go on a cruise on March 1st, and they asked her 2 days before their cruise was ready to go, she would have said, "Yeah, Mom, Dad, no big deal. It's not that deadly. No need to panic. It's already going away in China. So you'll be fine." She herself. Unbelievable. Now, listen, the responsible thing is to conclude that no one knew the extent of the threat on March 1st and give grace to everybody, which has been the theme of our entire show going back to the very beginning of March. Grace, 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 grace. Everyone, grace to yourself, grace to politicians, grace to everybody. But as A.G. Hamilton said, that would undermine the article's desperate attempt to blame this man's death on Fox News. So you can't give grace. I heard this standard and I like it. There's four levels. The ideal is you get it right. Someone gets it right. Politician, whoever, someone gets it right. That's the ideal. Acceptable. Get it wrong, but you apologize and do better. It's like Dr. Drew, right? We've always used him as the example. He's like, "I got this wrong, but I'm sorry. Here's why I got it wrong. Here's what I'm going to do to make sure I don't get it wrong in the future." That's great. Like you gotta encourage that. What's questionable is you get it wrong and you try to skate by, try to ignore it, hope no one noticed. But what's insane is you get it wrong, you assume people forget, feign moral authority, and then point fingers at everybody else. And that's what that woman did right there. She herself said the virus was no big deal at that same time. That she's accusing Sean Hannity of murdering this couple. And then, of course, you get this one from Joe Biden. Joe Biden said, "Donald Trump's not responsible for COVID, but he's responsible for our slow, uncoordinated response. Experts say that if we acted 2 weeks earlier, more lives could have been saved. Trump failed to take swift action, and we are paying for the price," said the man who's running for president still, oddly. And sometimes I forget that he still is. Now, I just want to be clear. The White House issued their 15 days, 15 days to slow the spread, or whatever, their big proclamation on March 15th. So 2 weeks earlier, it would have been March 2nd. Joe Biden held rallies in Houston and Dallas on March 2nd, LA on March 3rd, St. Louis and Kansas City on March 7th, Grand Rapids and Detroit on March 9th, and Philadelphia on March 10th. Here's his rally in Detroit on the 9th, right here. Look at that. Blood on your hands, Joe Biden. Blood on your hands. Look at all those people that you murdered. Why didn't you see it sooner, Mr. Vice President? Look at all the lives you could have saved. Come on. Our reporter's going to ask, I'm not, you get what I'm saying? Our reporter's going to ask him that every single day? Our reporters every single day, as long as he lives, are they going to ask him, "Why did you have a rally on this date? Why did you have this rally? Why did you ignore health warnings? Why didn't you listen to the experts?" Blah, blah, blah. Every single day you're going to ask him that question? Because you are President Trump. Richard Feynman, he is a scientist. He won the Nobel Prize in 1965. He gave the Caltech commencement address a couple decades back. And he said about scientists, he said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself. You are the easiest person to fool. So you have to be very careful about that." So many reporters especially are fooling themselves and trying to rewrite history in the process. Even Dr. Fauci himself back in February said this is no big deal, don't worry, it shouldn't become a pandemic. Even Dr. Fauci himself back in February. A proper question for the president would be, "Mr. President, when the experts were giving you their suggestions, like what factors did you put into play when you were deciding whether or not to close down the economy or not? And are those factors still the same today? Have you added different factors? Are you weighing them differently? Like, how are you thinking about the decisions, the big decisions that you're making right now? See how that's an honest question. It's based off of curiosity, not based off of, why didn't you do this? Every single day. But it's all because they brought the tools to the toolbox that they have. Orange man bad, make president look bad, get flashy headline, get clicks, make myself feel good. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So we've been talking a lot recently about the Wuhan Institute of Virology and whether or not this thing came from a lab, and we don't know, and maybe we'll never know, but one of the first people to say maybe, or it's possible, was Stephen Mosher, and he wrote this article in the New York Post, and you weren't allowed to share it on Facebook and Twitter because they deemed it false. And then a couple, weeks later, as we know, the Washington Post came out and said, oh, by the way, the State Department said there's a very high likelihood that something could escape from this lab and cause a global pandemic. Stephen Mosher is here. He's the author of Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to World Order. Mr. Mosher, how are you, sir?
I'm good. China's not so
surprised?
Good.
That's right. Were you surprised that Facebook and Twitter wouldn't let people share your article?
Well, after 10 million shares, I was a little surprised they would intercede at that point. And then I looked at their fact checkers, and the two people they went to, it was astonished me because one, Danielle Anderson, works for the National University of Singapore, and she has a research project, an ongoing research project with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So you would think they wouldn't ask an interested party, who's in a professional relationship with the chief virologist of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, a woman named Dr. Shizhong Li, her opinion on this, because she's obviously got some irons in the fire here. Oh, by the way, her research project was how to research coronaviruses to anticipate and stop the possible escape, emergence into a human population of dangerous coronaviruses. That was her research project. Obviously, it failed, didn't it?
Unbelievable. Like that article you wrote, and please everyone read it in the New York Post. It was so amazing because it wasn't just like, oh, they're doing kind of crazy experiments at this lab. They're doing coronavirus experiments in bats. Right? It couldn't have been more specific to what we're doing right now. I don't want to really talk about that though, sir.
Hundreds of viruses,
amazing. And you talked about how people can sometimes sell these animals instead of disposing of them. It's just crazy. But I don't want to talk about that, sir, because your time's valuable, and I'd rather talk big picture. Your book, Bully of Asia. We've been talking about the Belt and Road Initiative a bit. I think we've done an okay job introducing it, but can you kind of take us back to the beginning? Like, what is it about the Chinese or the communist ambition for the world that we Americans need to be aware of?
Well, here's the world that the Chinese Communist Party wants to create. The Chinese Communist Party wants to create a world in which all manufacturing takes place in China, so that China is the manufacturing hub of the world. The rest of the world does what? The rest of the world's role in this is to provide raw materials for the Chinese industrial machine, and then to buy the consumer products that are produced by China's industrial machine. So basically, the policy is what Japan had towards Taiwan prior to World War II. It was to industrialize Japan and to agriculturalize, it's a strange new word, right? Agriculturalize Taiwan. So to use us as a source of food and raw materials, and then to produce all the goods in China. That's the idea that the Chinese Communist Party has to organize the world. That's not a world I want to live in.
Yeah, okay. How's that been going so far for them up until December, let's say?
Up until now? Well, I wrote another article in the Post just a couple of days ago, and I mentioned that 1/3 of all the manufactured goods in the world now have made in China stamped on them. So I would say up to the present time, it's been going pretty well for them. They've succeeded in moving a lot of manufacturing, as we know, from the Midwest of the United States. You might as well, up until Donald Trump took office, you might as well have carpet bombed the old industrial heartland of the United States because so many factories had closed in those states and reopened in China. But that's true of Japan, and that's true of Europe as well. And the good news now is the world has woken up, of course, to the danger from China and is trying to move manufacturing out of China. Japan now is paying its companies to leave China. They don't have to come back to Japan. If you close your factory in China, you don't have to open one in Japan. You can open one in the Philippines or Vietnam or India or the United. You can open one anywhere. Just leave China.
Wow.
Is the message from Tokyo.
Wow, that's great. I like that. That's good. Even if America did that and we pulled all our manufacturing back, with the investments that China's making in the Middle East and Africa, Africa's got 1.2 billion people, can they still achieve their ambition that they've set out for, even if we don't participate anymore and we wise up?
Well, that's a very interesting question. You know, we have to see how all this shakes out. And I think there's a lot of anger among the countries of the world. 182 countries of the world have the coronavirus. And I think there will be a day of reckoning, and countries that we may not have anticipated joining with us to demand a reckoning, countries like Kenya and Nigeria, I think are now not very well disposed towards the People's Republic of China. I think one of the things that has to happen is that the countries in the Belt and Road Initiative, which has basically been a deal where China says, we'll loan you $1 billion to build a port, but if you accept the loan, you have to bring in our military construction companies to actually build the port and pay us back the loan as salaries for the military construction workers. Oh, but wait a minute, you still owe us the loan, so you have to pay that back from the proceeds from the port of the railroad. And the proceeds from the port of the railroad aren't enough to pay back the loan, and so you default on the loan, and at the end of the day, China owns the port and the railroad. Did you follow all that? You know,
wow.
it's debt diplomacy. You loan somebody money knowing they can't pay it back, and then you take over the railroad or the port. I think a lot of countries at the end of the Belt and Road are going to say to China, we suffered tens of billions of dollars and hundreds of billions of dollars because of this coronavirus epidemic that you, China, unleashed on the world. And so we're going to default on our debt, and you're not going to be able to do anything about it. I think that that's going to be what a lot of countries at the end of the Belt and Road are going to say to China. They're going to take the Belt and Road loan as a down payment on the damage to their economy caused by the China pandemic.
Okay.
And
yeah.
they should. And they should.
No, I like that. It's hopeful. How leveraged are other countries? I mean, we've talked a lot about us, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit. I mean, we know with pharmaceuticals, we've heard about that a lot lately. But how leveraged are other countries? You mentioned like Kenya and even India, maybe. Can they stand up to China right now, or does China have too much power even now?
Well, India stayed out of this, quite frankly. Pakistan is heavily in debt to China. But India, you know, is now our de facto ally in containing China, has been for several years. That's why we renamed our Pacific Command the Indo-Pacific Command, because India is now a part of it. We're doing military exercises with India. We're helping them to arm their Navy. So we have closer and closer relationships with the largest democracy on the planet, right? India, that shares to a large extent our values and institutions. They're a natural ally, unlike the People's Republic of China, which obviously does not share our values and institutions. But take Kenya, for example. Kenya, they built a railroad, China did, from the capital of Kenya to the main port, Mombasa, right? Nairobi to Mombasa. And they projected that railroad would make a huge profit. Well, guess what? The rail cars aren't carrying enough freight to pay back the loan. By the way, the Chinese engineers who came in and built the railroad didn't train the Kenyans how to maintain it. And so the railroad, the cars, the trains and everything, the engines are still maintained by Chinese technicians, not by Kenyans. They're used for, digging trenches, but they're not being trained. All the manuals are in Chinese, by the way, which the Kenyans, who are English speakers, can't read. So that's another part of the scam here. China comes in, builds a railroad, runs a railroad, and makes you pay for it. Now, they're losing money on the railroad. So the point is, they own the railroad after a couple of years if Kenya defaults on the loan. I think Kenya ought to say to China, nope, you all go home, leave us with the manuals, we'll have them translated into English, and we'll run the railroad ourselves. So I think China's going to suffer trillions of dollars in losses.
Let's hope. Not only money, but what cultural influence does China bring to these Belt and Road countries for the worst when they come in? Maybe either institutional or cultural differences.
Well, I mean, the first thing they bring to these countries is a culture of corruption and bribery. I mean, the reason we've had so much trouble with the World Health Organization is it's headed by Dr. Tedros, who's a member of the ruling junta of Ethiopia, which is basically a group of communist thugs who have run the country for the last few decades. And Dr. Tedros is obviously was their candidate, China's candidate for the head of the World Health Organization, and is essentially owned by the Chinese Communist Party. The first offer that you receive from China is an offer to to give you certain inducements to cooperate with them. So they spread corruption wherever they go. That's one of the values that we're talking about.
I want to ask you this one last question. I got literally 60 seconds, but hopefully we can maybe talk next week and go into more detail because things are happening fast. And I want people to buy your book, Bully of Asia. But we're hearing a little bit about North Korea maybe, right? And Kim Jong-un, we don't really know yet, but holy cow. What do we do with that if you have a failed nuclear power right next to China? How should we be thinking about that?
Well, Kim Jong-un is apparently very ill. He apparently went in, if you looked at the guy over the years, you know he's carrying a few extra pounds, has cardiovascular disease. The surgery may not have gone well. Who knows who the doctor was? If Kim had executed one of the doctor's family members, maybe the scalpel slipped. But whatever the case, I don't think his prognosis is good simply because he's obviously has other medical conditions.
Sure.
And
do
the
we come in?
coronavirus
Do we have a war over this?
China is potentially destabilized. We may have a coup underway in Beijing right now. The leader of North Korea may die, and there may be dissent and rebellion there. Yeah, these are perilous times. We've got to be on the alert.
Wow. And I hate to cut you off on that question. That's such a big question, but maybe we could talk next week and we can slow that down because there's obviously, that's a big question. But hopefully we did a good introduction for the book. Everyone go buy it, Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to World Order. And Mr. Mosier's been ahead of a lot of this, even when the elites or whoever say, no, this is wrong. You can't even share this. You've been saying the truth. So, Mr. Mosier, appreciate your time, sir.
Good to talk to you.
Bully of Asia. More coming up. True story. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So this story right here is a little case study in how fast this virus can spread and how you can get it and not even know how. And that's so frustrating, right? If you ever get sick, you'd like to be like, oh, it was from here. I wish you could like see it and map it out. Like, oh, someone touched this button and then I touched it and now I have, right? But you will never know. So here's an example. So the USNS Mercy, that's the ship, the hospital ship that's usually in San Diego, and it's in LA right now. So this was as of last week. I haven't gotten an update on this since last week. I've looked everywhere, but 116 medical staff members have been removed from the ship because they have COVID. And 116, and they're now in quarantine, and no one knows how they got it. So they were tested before they got on board. They got to LA 4 days later. They don't treat COVID patients on this one. I think the ship in New York does, but the hospital ship in LA does not treat COVID patients. And they got a lot of heat for this. But the point, well, mostly this was a symbolic thing, really. But the point was to relieve pressure on the hospitals with other patients so that the hospitals could take care of COVID patients. So the Mercy took no COVID patients. None of the 1,000 people on board were allowed to leave the ship. So the only ones on and off were the patients. But there were only 20 patients. They have 1,000 beds on this ship, but only 20 patients from the hospital, and none of them tested positive or showed any signs of COVID. Isn't that amazing? And all the medical personnel, I mean, they got everything. They got full protective gear. They got gloves, N95 masks, goggles. They got everything. So how'd they get it? How did I guess one person get it and then spread it to others? How'd that possible? I don't know. We'll never know. Amazing, right? I want to take a quick point here, make a quick point about different regions of the country opening up slowly. I know we mentioned this in the first segment of the show about how Tennessee and Georgia are slowly opening up different parts. I think it's South Carolina starting to open up beaches. San Diego is opening up some different parks and stuff as well for walking around and all that. Coming up on Friday, on our special, we're going to talk with a professor of virology at Columbia University, which is pretty awesome. We're going to talk about viruses in general. That course, his virology course, it's free on YouTube. It's Very not boring for an Ivy League course on virology. And I look forward, maybe we can ask about phylogenetics. Listen, I've spent so much time pretending to be an epidemiologist. I'm not going to pretend to be a phylogeneticist, okay? I just don't have the bandwidth to pretend that much, okay? We have so many people who were epidemiologists yesterday who are now oil market experts. I can't also be a phylogeneticist. But this is a thing, it's a science. And they track the changes of RNA sequencing to create a sort of like family tree, and they can trace back. So you have like, let's say they take 10 viruses, and then they map the RNAs and they kind of like match them up, and they can say, oh, here's the main virus that led to all these different mutations, and this one is from Wuhan or whatever, right? Now, I don't know how much precision there is in this. I mean, I don't know if they're like, oh yeah, 100% certainty, or they're like, I don't know, maybe we're kind of guessing. But there's a study done of COVID patients in Connecticut, and they noticed that a lot of the spread in Connecticut came from, not New York, but from Washington State. Those places are pretty far apart from each other. I'll save all the science-y stuff here, but here's their conclusion. We argue that our model demonstrates the urgent need to focus control efforts in the US on preventing further domestic virus spread. As the epidemic progresses, domestic introductions of the virus could undermine control efforts in areas that have successfully mitigated local transmissions. So let's say your town does a great job in preventing local transmissions, but then someone from Nashville flies in and then gets everyone sick again, right? So that's the difference between local spread and domestic spread. And then you have international spread, obviously from China or wherever. If interstate introductions are not curtailed in the US with improved surveillance measures, more robust diagnostic capabilities, and proper clinical care, quelling local transmission within states will be a Sisyphean task. Sisyphus, one of my favorite Greek myths, is the guy who, in the underworld, he has to roll the giant boulder up the hill, and then when he just gets to the top, it rolls back down again, and he has to do that for all of eternity. So a Sisyphean task is something we would be doing for all of eternity, and I don't want to be fighting this virus for all of eternity. Now listen, who knows if these scientists are right? Who knows if this conclusion is the right conclusion to make based off of what they may or may not have found? I have no idea. But as I said when Bill Gates made his opinions on what to do next, it doesn't matter if he's right or wrong. It really doesn't. He's influential. And if our politicians believe that this research is true, then they will impose this on you, whether it's the right move or not. I mean, we can, does that make sense? Does that difference make sense? Like, we can spend all day being like, oh no, this is wrong. But if the politicians think it's right, then they're not gonna let you get on an airplane, is my point. Now, we're in the very beginning of this. I know it feels like we're almost done. Even our local mayor here in San Diego said there's light at the end of the tunnel. No way, man. No way. Remember the 1918 Spanish flu graph that we've showed before? There's 3 peaks, a little peak and then a huge peak and then a medium peak. We could be in the very middle of that first little peak. We're like, light at the end of the tunnel. And we have no idea what's coming ahead of us. So depending on how things go in these next few weeks, once places start to open up a little bit, and I'm actually kind of glad they are in a way, because then we get some more case studies and we can see, oh, like we don't want to do that. Like we're still in that data collection phase, so it's good that people are doing different things. But we'll get an idea of how bad this thing can reemerge or spread again. And I say because if things go poorly, let's say Tennessee opens up again, and they can do the science where they determine that the outbreak in California came from Tennessee, right? Prepare for the government perhaps instituting some sort of limit on interstate travel. Check out this fact about airline travel. So during the first 2 weeks of April, 200,000 people booked flights on United Airlines. That to me still seems like a lot, 200,000, but that's down from 6 million during the same period last year. They expect fewer people in the entire month of May than a single day of May last year. Wow. So it really depends on how things go here, but if things take a turn for the worst down the road, maybe prepare for an even bigger crackdown against travel. But we'll see. Have a great rest of your day, Slater Crusaders. See you tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word.